Who's iPad 3? Oh, okay. I can't hear you. Okay. I'm learn how to use this thing myself. Well, do you have voice? Can you hear me? Okay, then hang in there and you can listen when Robbie comes on. Should be another, whenever he gets here. Here he comes now. Okay. Robert Patrick, you got your,
Good morning.
good morning, you got your Santa Claus hat on, huh?
No, you should be getting a picture of me.
No,
Hello,
I just,
hello.
all I see something is you in Florida with a picture of you in a Santa Claus hat.
No, you should have me live moving in a black and white striped shirt. Let me try down here.
No, I don't have it.
Oh dear, never had this all working yesterday. We should have done it yesterday. I'm going to very quickly reboot.
Okay. Good. She's recording. Okay, now he's emitting you again. Okay. Now we got you. Now we got you.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Are you in Florida or New York?
Am I what?
Where are you coming from? New York or Florida?
Los Angeles.
I didn't know you lived in Los Angeles.
I've lived in Los Angeles in this house at this desk for 27 years.
Really?
Yes. I've done dozens of shows out here. I've been invisible to the greater world.
Oh, but now where is your theater located at?
Oh, I work in, I stopped playwriting when I left New York in 1993. And I did nothing out here. Are we on air?
Yes, we're recording right now.
I did nothing out here until a few years ago. I was just vegetating.
Mhm.
And a few years ago, some fans of mine, young men who had read my plays in school, discovered that I lived here, looked me up, talked me into being in a little show of theirs where I had to sing. And I'm no singer, I thought, but it was just a little song, anyone could sing it. To their and my great surprise, at 75, I got a standing ovation.
Good for you.
And since then, I've concentrated on writing and performing songs in cabarets all over LA.
Wow,
I did 3 one-man shows.
really, it's amazing. Now, how did you
Yes,
get
isn't
started?
it?
You started in
I
New
never-
York.
Hmm?
You started
Oh,
in
yeah.
New York, in your theater.
I started in
and
theater in New York. I started singing out here.
Yeah, but I mean, in New York.
Yes.
Now, what type of plays do you write? I apologize, but your theater.
Oh, well, you see behind me the front
Yes,
of a little place called the Cafe Chino.
that sounds so familiar. Was that in the Village?
In 1961, a man named Joe Chino, a retired dancer, opened a coffee house so his friends could get together. Some of his friends started putting on plays, old plays at first, and then in 1962, they did the first original play that they did there. By the time I arrived in September 1961, they were doing a new American play every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And playwrights who did their first plays there include Lanford Wilson, John Guare, Sam Shepard, Tom Ian, who wrote Dreamgirls, Bill Hoffman, who wrote As Is. The list is just amazing. And directors like Tom O'Horgan and Marshall Mason, and minor playwrights such as myself. And I did plays there till it closed in 1968. But by that time, the milieu that the Chino had created off Broadway featured 300 theaters in New York alone, including La Mama,
Yes,
the most famous one, which is still running, by the way.
right, on West 4th Street.
They did a festival of my plays last year.
Okay.
And I traveled all over America talking about Off Broadway. And then some people did a little play of mine called Kennedy's Children in London. And the next thing I knew, I was traveling all over Europe, seeing productions of it, came to New York for a fabulous production of it on Broadway, in which Miss Shirley Knight won her Tony. However, it was a great big flop in New York after being the sensation of Europe. And I began to drop out of theater then. I traveled for 10 years. I traveled on behalf of a high school theater fraternity called Thespians. I visited over 1,000 high schools or high school theater festivals throughout 49 states over a period of 10 years. And then I just sort of burned out, left New York, came to LA for no particular reason, had friends out here. All my friends in New York were dead or famous, which amounts to the same thing. And then just vegetated here till these wonderful guys dragged me back into theater and we discovered my singing voice. And that's it in a nutshell. This is my Picasso shirt, you see. I got this shirt to sing a series of songs about Picasso.
Well, he was around then.
Yes.
And where was the theater located at?
31 Cornelia Street.
Oh, Cornelia Street, yes, in the village.
It's 1 block long street.
Yes.
I had been working at a summer stock theater in Maine. See, I never dreamed I could actually go to New York and be in theater. That was something that Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney did in movies. I'm from New Mexico. People from New Mexico don't go to Broadway and do plays. So I'd never thought I could actually go, but I was working at a summer stock theater in Kennebunkport, Maine, and the bus on the way back home stopped in New York. And I thought, well, I'll get off and see Greenwich Village where the artists are. I was only going to stay a day. I went to Greenwich Village. I followed the first long-haired boy I'd ever seen. He was selling jewelry on the street, and I followed him in my first half hour in New York into that door there, a little place called the Cafe Chino, and I never left.
It's
They created modern theater at the Chino. It's like the Renaissance.
I lived in the village in 67, 68, 69.
Well, you knew La Mama then. The Chino, the
Sure.
Chino was closed by then, but La Mama, all of La Mama started at the Chino.
Yeah, it was over there by the Club 82, La Mama.
Oh, Club 82, yes.
It was there on West 4th Street. Yeah, okay.
I did shows there.
Yeah, that was it's a great place. Yeah, the village was there's so many artists came out of there. I went to acting school right there. One of the off-Broadway theaters ran out of Manhart. It was on LaGuardia Place.
Yes. Well, when people ask me what it was like then, all I can say is that there was no better time in the history of the universe to be young.
Yes.
Than in New York downtown underground theater in the 1960s.
Yes.
The burst of freedom, we had all been educated accidentally. The three things, I would say the three things that Americans hated when I was growing up in the 50s in Texas and New York, in New Mexico, were sex, art, and intelligence. And I was beat up far more often for carrying books home from school than for being gay.
Really?
They absolutely hated the arts. So it was only a lot of us ran away from places like that to New York and other cities too, but basically New York. I got into theater accidentally because of the Chino. Many people came for theater, but it was like Florence during the Renaissance, or Athens during the classical era, or Hollywood in the 20s, when all the best minds and best talents found one place to go to.
Yeah.
Am I going on too long?
No, please. It's amazing. I would like, how was your relationship with Shirley? I knew Shirley out there.
Well, now you understand, this was, I was in London. We were about to open Kennedy's Children there in the back room of a bar, and we lost an actress. So we're desperately looking through. They had this big book in London called The Big Book. Actors put their faces in it, and you look through it to see who's looking for work. And I said, my God, that's Shirley Knight. She's an American actress. We must call her. So we called her, but she didn't want to do the play because she said, it's not really a play, it's just a series of monologues. So we said, okay, and somebody else did it, and it went on to become this worldwide hit. Then we got to New York to do it on Broadway, and we could not find a woman for this one role. We read every beautiful young woman in New York, and no one was right. We read Betty Buckley, and all she could do was cry. She was very good, you understand? But every young woman in New York we read, and I brought. Do you know who Mary Warnoff is? She used to be a Warhol actress. Stunning.
Oh yes, yes.
Ingrid Bergman-esque sort of woman. Yeah. I flew Mary in from Hollywood to audition for my director, Clive Donner,
Clive
in
Donner,
New York.
director, huh?
And he said, Bob, you're right. She's absolutely perfect for it, but she's too strong for me to direct. And there we were, and we were going to cancel the show. You know, it was just, if we weren't going to do it right, we didn't want to do it. And then the phone rang. And this voice said, this is Shirley Knight. I understand you're doing Kennedy's Children in New York. If you want me, I'm available. Well, I considered her one of the greatest actresses alive, you know. So we called her, and it was literally the day she came down. We sent her the script. She came down the next day to rehearse, to open rehearsals. And there was some little confusion. She thought we were offering her one of the other roles. So she and another actress started reading at the same time. And they looked at each other and they looked at me. And Clive said, no, no, Shirley, darling, it's the other role.
Hey.
And Shirley said, oh, I see. Well, excuse me, I don't want to take extra time at rehearsal, but I did read the whole play, of course. And it seemed to me that Carla is the character in the play with the greatest depth, intelligence, passion, articulateness. And Clive said, precisely. And Shirley said, you want me to play an intelligent woman? I said, please, dear. And she said, all right. And it was a joy. And since your show is called The Method Actor Speaks Back, would you like me to talk about something about what I observed?
Sure, yeah, I love it.
Because it was
Whatever you want to talk about, go.
It was an astonishing performance, Shirley as Carla. I wish we had videoed it. There is a video of the play, but done by someone else. It's not the same production, and she's marvelous in it, but one, it's unavailable, and two, it does not quite hit the same alpine peaks that she did. Shirley, whom I knew only from movies and a couple of TV dramas I'd seen her do. Did you ever see The Lie?
Yes.
Amazing, amazing. You can't get it, you know. No, there is a video, but no one can find it. I knew her only from the movies, and you know, they say Joanne Woodward, who many people considered at that point the finest young actress in Hollywood, when they would call and offer her a role, would say, have you offered it to Shirley? Because Shirley made a lot of enemies with her frankness about her attitudes about Hollywood films, and she was not offered the career she should have had.
Yes.
That's why we were able to get her for Broadway. But she was that good. Even other actors loved her. And watching her, we had a young actress in the company as well named Kailani Lee, who had not acted before. It was her first time ever on a stage. And she was obviously nervous up against all these professionals. And I heard Shirley say to Kailani once during rehearsals, darling, don't try to imitate me or what I'm doing. You don't know enough to do that. You will burn yourself out. She said, I know so much about acting that I can approach a role from 24 different ways. And if it starts to burn out in one direction, I can go to any of those other directions. You don't know enough about it yet. Do what you know, learn what you can, do what you can, listen very closely to the director, and maybe someday you will, she didn't say you'll be as good as me. She said, you'll know as much what you're doing as I. Shirley worshiped acting. She felt about it like I feel about playwriting, like Michelangelo probably felt about sculpture. It's simply the highest form of human expression, or was, you know, Shirley died this year.
Yes.
But she cared about acting, qua acting, in a way I've never known other performers, even people as talented as her. She loved her family. She loved her husband. She was passionate about various political causes, but at the core, it was acting. She looked at herself as if she was a block of stone and she was Michelangelo, and she must carve that stone into the character. And you can imagine the kind of trouble that got her into with Hollywood people. Of course, I'm not sure. There are many kinds of acting, you know. And in America, we have among the artistic world, the acting, the dramatic world, because they have to include movies and TV as well, not just the stage. We tend to be obsessive about what we call method acting, which was, of course, what Jackson Pollock was to painting. The whole concept of method acting seemed to us when I was young. But I watched a play every 2 weeks at the Cafe Chino, and many plays in many countries. There are great values to every kind of acting, just as there are to every kind of painting or music composition. Now, I favor what we call method acting. To me, for which I define as going inside the script, the production, yourself, and the character, and finding the reality of every moment. But there are other kinds of acting that have a value for an audience. There's slapstick and farce. There's very conservative, ritualistic, conventional Shakespearean acting. There's musical comedy acting, where there's no time to think. And they're all equally valuable to an audience. I think we tend to forget when we're doing our work that eventually there's people out there who are going to come home from work, bathe, dress, get in the car, drive 20 miles, pay for parking, and come see us. And they deserve that we think of them, not just of our satisfaction as artists. So it's a strange art. You can paint for yourself, and you can compose for yourself, I suppose, and you can write for yourself. But it's very hard to act for yourself, don't you think?
Good point.
It's often been thought of as a rather tawdry area of the arts, theater, which may be one reason why it wasn't till the Cafe Chino that theater began to. I must backtrack and
Go
define that. The other arts in about 1860 or 70, the other arts began to enter what we call the modern era. We were suddenly artists felt themselves in competition with the advances in science, in technology, in politics, in philosophy. You know, they felt the idea of painting back then was just who can paint the most realistically illusionistic painting. But along came something called photography, and that could do all of the illusion you wanted. So painters began to look for a validation of themselves, and so on in all the arts. And we had what we call the modern era, you know, Cubism, Impressionism, Socialism, social realism, Expressionism, Dada. But theater lagged behind the other arts because it does have that. Ultimately, it must appeal to someone. So what Joe Chino did by accident, by the way, he did not set out to start a theater movement. Joe Chino let people do plays, whatever they wanted to, on the floor of his little coffee house. And we did it for free. Now understand, these were new plays. So we didn't have to appeal to the people or the press or the priests or the policemen or the pundits. For the first time ever in the history of theater, theater was an independent, personally expressive, personally responsible art form. And out of that came, I mean, 8 years after I walked into Chino, Tom O'Horgan opened Hair on Broadway. And it's hard for us to remember now how revolutionary an idea that was, that something like Hair could be on a public Broadway stage. But that all came out of, Tom O'Horgan did his very first shows at the Chino, then at La Mama, and then worldwide. And so many other people. I could spend all day praising various people who, because of this curious freedom that Joe accidentally gave us, started at the Cafe Chino. Theater entered the modern era. That's all that sums it up. And what it's done since, it hasn't stayed at that outre distance, that infinite distance of independence, because ultimately one must pay the rent. But the very idea of experimental theater started there. My story is typical. I came from people who probably voted for Trump, in small towns in Texas and in Mexico. I love movies, comic books, magazines, radio. We didn't have television yet when I was a boy. But I never dreamed really that there was nothing to encourage me toward the arts, especially not towards theater, which I worshiped, but never thought of myself as participating in. So I came in the Chino, was knocked out by what I saw happening around me. Was roommates with just about every great name in American theater at one point or another. And I would come into the Chino from my office job at Macmillan Publishers. I'd come running into the Chino, whip my tie off and say, "What do you need, Joe?" And I'd shop or mop or wait tables or appear in plays if they needed an extra. No thought of pay, of course. So I did that for 3 years. And one day I was helping move into the Chino the scenery for Lanford Wilson's first play. You know Lanford's work?
Yes, Lanford Wilson, yes.
And so I was helping move the scenery, and it was our sofa, as a matter of fact. And I turned and looked at the stage manager and the director on the stage, testing the sofa that folded out and folded back. It had to do so during the play, so they were testing it. And a funny thing happened. I'd written poetry ever since high school, but I'd never even thought of writing a play. But I got an idea for a play about two men opening a sofa and folding it back. And we went over to have lunch, and I picked up a napkin and I started writing. And eventually I had this play called The Haunted Host. And I took it into Joe. And I said, Joe, I wrote a play, you ought to do it. And he took the play from me, tossed it over his shoulder into the garbage, and said, Bob, you don't want to be a playwright. Playwrights are terrible people. You're a great guy. You pull your weight around here. You'll thank me someday. And I said, oh, okay. But there happened to be three playwrights there. Lanford Wilson, Tom Ian, who later wrote Dreamgirls, and Paul Foster, who wrote Tom Paine. And Lanford said, Joe, Bob works hard around here. You ought to do his little play. And Joe said, no. And Lanford said, if you don't do Bob's play, we won't ever do a play here again. He spoke for Tom and Paul. And Joe said, oh, all right, but you'll be sorry. And he reached over and picked it up, brushed the coffee grounds out of it. Well, I'm happy to say that 59 years later, the play is still being done.
Wow.
So Lanford was right. But that's the kind of, it was that casual. If Joe had told, if Lanford hadn't been there, I would have stopped writing plays, or I have no idea, no reason to believe I would have written more. It was that casual, is my point. One time, an actress got mad at a customer who was razzing her, and she walked out. Just left the stage. The stage was, the floor. She just walked out, and suddenly we had no show. So we called every playwright in town and said, "Have you got a 5-minute skit?" For every director, every actor, and in minutes, it seemed, we had a review with working it by Sam Shepard, Jean-Claude Van Natale, Megan Terry, Lanford Wilson, Tom Ian. In fact, I didn't have time to get a play of mine in it. I was so busy producing. But I mean, we could casually call these future Pulitzer Prize and Tony winners. And they'd say, "Sure, I'll whip out a play." The same way Picasso might say, "Sure, I'll whip out a drawing." Because suddenly the work is very different from if all you're trying to write is Mary, Mary, or The Sunshine Wins. I found a letter last night, an old letter from Lanford, in which he compares a play he's writing. He says, "It's not as funny as Mary, Mary, but what is?" Now, I don't know if you know Mary, Mary. Mary, Mary was always looked down on as the characteristic cheap laughs Broadway play, a Neil Simon type play. But Lanford and I secretly worshiped it because Jean Kerr, the author's technique was so good. We may not have wanted to write what she wrote, but we wanted to write that well. We wanted to be able to give an audience laughter as she did. So I found this letter last night where Lanford in 1990 something was still using her as a standard comparison. Why did I start that? It was a strange time. Ask me a question.
No, I was just wondering, what about some of the actors? Because I'm a member of the Actors Studio, but I was wondering who some of the actors that came on to do the plays, if you remember them.
I think there was, at the time, by no one's particular wish, I think there was a bit of a division between off-Broadway,
yes,
and the world at whose center Actors Studio existed. Because Actors Studio was sort of attached to the commercial, professional, if you will, theater.
yes, it really was back then.
It was, certainly we had people, but I mean, the first, Al Pacino acted at the Chino.
That's what I'm saying.
Just before I got there, he did, and he spoke not long ago and talked about how important the Chino was in his development. But he did his last play there just before I popped in. So, and I guess you know Bernadette Peters.
Sure.
Bernadette.
Good Italian girl.
Yes, Bernadette did her first play there.
Yes. Yes.
And I believe Sylvester Stallone and many, many other actors who may not have been as big a attraction off as they became later, with a different kind of way. There was one thing about the Chino that to this day, it's a mixed blessing. It was very much associated with homosexuality. Lanford and I did what people call the first gay plays ever written at the Chino. Lanford's Madness of Lady Bright and My Haunted Host. So it was inevitably associated vaguely with homosexuality and drugs. There were a lot of drugs around off-Broadway. I wrote the first comedy about LSD, and we did it in the Chino. I think that there was a sort of almost moralistic wedge. If I racked my head, I could probably name a lot of actors who attended Actors Studio who also eventually acted off, but it wasn't see, very often at the Chino, we had to get a play up in a day. And a lot of people who came to places like the Chino came because they thought maybe they'd have a chance there, even though they were not tutored or hadn't studied, and they learned while doing.
Doing, yes, on the job training.
But to me, okay, I'm going to flash ahead and then flash back. While we were doing Kennedy's Children on the road, the Broadway production was on the road after its very brief Broadway run. And we were here in LA at a theater then called the Huntington Hartford. It's now called the Ricardo Montalban, but it was then called the Huntington Hartford Theater. And Shirley Knight, Barbara Rush, and the Broadway cast basically. And one night, a friend of mine, a wonderful woman named
Marcia Hunt?
Martha Scott.
Martha Scott?
Didn't know Martha?
I know the
She was
name,
an
but
actress.
the actress.
She was an actress and a producer. And she was wanting to produce a play of mine called Judas. So I saw a lot of her. And she came to see Kennedy's Children one night when I was there. And afterwards, she said, Bob, Gregory Peck would like to meet you. I said, okay, he certainly may. And outside the stage door, there stood Gregory Peck. And he said, I so enjoyed your play and I wanted to meet you. My daughter wants to be an actress. And I don't know what school to recommend to her. And I know you've been seeing lots of young actors for this play. And I wondered if any of them had stood out and if you knew where they had studied. And I said automatically, because it was quite true, I said, almost every actor that I remember from our auditions turned out to have studied with Sandy Meisner or to have studied Meisner technique somewhere. And Peck gave me a very odd look. I said, thank you, and left. I said, what was that about, Martha? She said, Bob, Greg studied with Sandy, and he thought you were just flattering him. But that's just the story. But I tell a story to you that though I have this approval of all kinds of acting, what really gets me is what I think of as Meisner. Tell me his names.
Sanford Meisner.
Yes, and
Uta Hagen.
Yes, all these people, the kind of acting they believed in, I truly believe almost with a religious fervor.
Stella Adler was another one.
Stella Adler, my God.
Yes.
And the gentleman that Marilyn came here to study with.
Strasberg.
Strasberg.
That's the Actors Studio.
Yes. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All of those people. So the first person who explained method acting to me explained it in negative terms, as it were. He said, it's like this, Bob. You come on stage, one of these off Broadway stages. There's nothing but you and an actor in a chair. You haven't had enough rehearsal. You don't really understand the character. You're not sure the other actor does, but you're in front of an audience and you don't know what else to do. So you know the lines. You don't have to think about the lines. You just look at the other actor and you let whatever you're feeling at that moment come through and you play it and you hope that he responds with whatever he's honestly feeling and you get it going. And before long, it starts relating in the audience's mind and in your mind to the subject matter of the script. And you have a fresh, absolutely original, and hopefully absolutely authentic work of dramatic art that you could not get if you had a traditional mode of acting, as the British do, or as I think they have on sitcoms. Have you ever seen 2.5 Men?
2.5 Men. Oh yeah, yes.
They do some wonderful acting on that show, but it is the same acting every week.
Yes.
And that's what it's intended to be. They're not violating any artistic principle of theirs.
Yes.
The writer gives them new jokes, and they say them just like they said the joke last week, and the audience laughs just like it laughed. So there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a thrill that comes, and probably comes more often in acting classes than on stage, because there's those people in those seats who have had to look for parking, and they deserve your concern. I saw a revival of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with, I think, Ben Gazzara.
Oh, Ben Gazzara.
Yeah.
One of the best.
And a woman whose name starts with a K. Kathleen.
K. Kendallin? No, that's it.
Anyway, and it was absolutely not Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I mean, no way was it recognizable as that play. Oh, not that they'd changed the lines, but they had found a relationship between that man and woman that was so intricate and so different from like the movie, where it's great movie, great performances. But these people had found something that fit the script, that did not deny or defile the author's purpose, but made the whole play fresh again. And a lot of it they did standing downstage, talking to the audience.
Uh-huh.
And you could only find that with a lot of rehearsal. You could only find that with a lot of exploration of the role. Another one, the seagull.
Yes.
Okay. I hope.
But let me get back to Ben Gazzara was so underrated as an actor.
Well, I want to tell you, it was just, I don't know what Albee thought of it, but I felt, I saw the play, but I saw it completely fresh. It wasn't like they were doing it dressed as animals or something. It was from within. Do you know, okay, I hope Seagull's the right one. It's been so long since I read all these things. The play that starts with the man and the woman walking in the country. And he says, "Why do you always wear black?" And she says, "I'm in mourning for my life. I'm unhappy." Now, that is perhaps the most famous opening exchange of any play ever. I have seen it done so many ways in classes. I've never seen it done right on stage, but I can see why, because the reason that playwright was such a bloody genius, that man says, "Why do you always wear black?" Do you know how many ways there are to say that? It can be, "Why do you always wear black?" Like, "I've always meant to ask you this, but I never got it." Or, "Why do you always wear black?" Like, "You told me last night, but I've forgotten." Or, "Why do you always wear black?" As if he wishes she were happier and is concerned with himself, not her. There is so much going on in the first line of the play. And then she says back, "I'm in mourning for my life." That's a witty thing to say.
Yes, it is.
Well, this is a witty woman. Why is she dealing with a man who asks such a silly question? And I saw a woman, I wish I could remember her name. She said, I'm in mourning for my life. And then she put her hand up as if apologizing for stretching further than his imagination could go, and said, "I'm unhappy." Well, do you need any more of the play?
No.
And you know something? Almost none of that is in the play.
Really?
Well, I mean, none of that. None of that.
I know what you mean, yes.
And you see what, when you read plays after understanding that a play script can do that, and no other kind of literature can, only something that people are going to act and express with their whole bodies live in front of you, can allow an artist that kind of subtlety. And it's sometimes I think when I see people trying to apply these new ways of acting to old plays, to Shakespeare, for instance, I'm embarrassed because it doesn't necessarily work. He didn't write that way. You know, he just didn't. I mean, you can certainly find whole different approaches to Hamlet, for instance. There are many, many different approaches, but can you imagine a whole cast up indulging one another that way? Okay, let's give it to me. Let me see what you're finding in Hamlet tonight. We'll see what my Horatio or my Claudius finds. It can't do that. They were written to be acted a certain way. Now, I'm sure we don't know how they acted because we don't have movies of it. And that's what has messed up the art of acting, is the fact that we now have records of acting. We're not dependent on the last living person who saw the performance, you know, of Keane or Burbage. We can see it. I can click a button right here. I can show you some of my. If anyone is watching us, and if they'd like to see, okay, I wrote a play called Judas, which I and many other people think is quite my best play. It hasn't been done nearly as often as one would think. It has a great leading role for a dignified man of 50. You'd think it would be done everywhere in the world, but perhaps it's religious subject matter. I don't know. Anyway, I love it, and many people do. There was a production of it once, and we lost our leading man, who was to be Mark Leonard. Do you know his work?
No.
Did you ever see Star Trek?
Yeah, sure.
He played Spock's father on Star Trek.
Yes, I know who you mean now.
He came to me once and said, "You don't know me. I'm Mark Leonard. I would love to read for you your play Judas, because I would love to play pilot in it." I said, "Sure." Well, he was an American Gielgud. It was, and I know knew Gielgud. He was an American Gielgud. There was such depth, such richness, such intelligence, such power, but that TV money was very attractive. So we arranged that he would do the play. And I thought, this is great. Not only am I finally going to be known for something besides Kennedy's Children, but we're going to introduce a great new leading man to the American theater. And he called and said, "Bob, I just got an offer I can't resist for a series of Star Trek conventions." And then we went, well, that happened with a lot of people. So I wound up having to play it. We had announced the production, and no way did anyone think I was an actor, but I was handy. So you can see online on YouTube, under Robert Patrick Play Complete Judas, you can see me playing this role as I feel it ought to be played. I don't claim to be as good as I would like, but it's played right. And if anyone who's watching your show wants to see what I think of as good acting in my plays, they can watch Judas. Are you called elsewhere?
No. I hung up. I didn't want them to hear.
And I did it pretty well. I don't mind watching it. I wish I had the voice of Jose Ferrer. I wish I had the stance of Gregory Peck. I wish I had more to bring to it, but I did it okay. And it's all from, in this case, as the author, I feel I do know the inner life of the character. But the reason it's as good as it is, whatever it is because I knew the words without thinking about them, and I could let the inner life of the character. And here's, okay, we're back in that coffee house with this stage with 2 chairs and you and another actor, and you're getting nothing. Nothing is happening for you. How do you feel about the chair? Do you like that chair? Does that chair remind you of something you enjoyed or something you hated? Let it. Or if it's not doing anything for you, you say, well, but how would he feel about that chair? And let that out. and something will happen. And hopefully, if you and the other actor have anything like the same background, he'll let something happen in response. And you may get some pretty odd moments. You may get comic moments in serious plays that the author didn't know was there, but that may get you to a level of connection that makes the next scene. Now, about, as I was saying, much as I love this kind of acting, much as I suspect you do, there are other kinds. A lot of movie people hate the stage. A lot of stage people hate movies, but you can't compare the two.
No.
Do you know a movie called The Country Girl with Grace Kelly, Bing Crosby, William Holden?
Yes.
There's a scene online, is why I bring it up, which you can watch with William Holden and Grace Kelly. And I suspect it's the only one. Look it up, Country Girl, Grace Kelly, William Holden, where he has thought she's a terrible person. He's thought she's been wrecking her husband's life. And he's just found out that it's quite the other way around. And he's embarrassed as hell. The husband has left and left him alone with Grace Kelly. And he's just stunned. Well, Holden was a good actor. He was a great presence. He was a terrific personality. But he was a good actor. Good, solid, intelligent, had attitude, which is everything.
Yeah.
But in this scene with Grace Kelly, he's very mechanical. He does it right. He does the right things. But it's, well, now for all we know, they had to film the scene 20 times and the editor used the 20th time when he was burned out.
It's true.
We'll never know. Grace Kelly, on the other hand, is sensational. And I never thought she was that great an actress in other pictures. But she gets down inside that woman, and it's so complex, and there's so much memory coming back, and she knows she's taking it out on him, and she finally really notices him and lays him low, and then he grabs her and kisses her. And it's really amazingly effective because of her performance. It's a good scene, it's a well-written scene, but she just, somebody told her, Grace, you do this the right way, you'll get an Oscar, I guess. And she let go. And he is not really giving her anything, doesn't seem to be giving her anything to work from. So you figure it's all inside, or the director, or they took 20 takes of her.
Oh, it's the editing, yes.
And by accident, she got it right in one scene, and she might be a total idiot and have no idea why she did it that way. And yet for you, sitting in that seat, it's a tremendous experience. She really was great in it. She's charming. And you see that in movies so often. You see that occasional scene, which if you love acting, did you ever see a movie called Bell, Book, and Candle with Kim Novak?
Kim Novak.
Yes. Yeah. She plays a witch.
Yes.
And Jimmy Stewart is in love with her. Asked her to marry him. He doesn't know she's a witch. He asked her to marry him, and she's shocked. Like, almost like he'd made a lewd, because, they just don't do that. And then she says, let's talk about something else. And they go into the kitchen of a New York apartment, and she makes tea while pondering his suggestion and making it clear that it can't conceivably ever happen, and all this. And it's mesmerizing. I never thought of her as particularly a good actress or a bad actress, or she's lovely, absolutely lovely, and who cares? But it's the oddest thing, being given a task to do. And a nicely written little transition by the author. She just, for me anyway, now I've never known anyone else who even noticed the scene. It's a fun movie, a very enjoyable movie. But I'll ask people, and what about that scene in the kitchen? They never noticed it. And maybe that's maybe that's the thing about good acting. Maybe you oughtn't to notice it. But in this case, since the rest of it is just standard conventional romantic comedy acting with poses and faces. Do you remember what Garbo said when she quit? She, you know, she made her last movie in like 1940, and Hitler was already doing this number in Europe, and the money wasn't coming in from Europe, and her pictures had always made more money in Europe than in America. So she and Metro agreed that it'd take a few years off, see what happens with this war. And she, of course, gave no interviews about it. But a friend said that as she got on the boat, she said, "Now I will make no more faces." Isn't that one? No. The other night, I introduced a friend to an old movie called Grand Hotel, which I guess I and many people consider kind of the ultimate MGM movie. It's full of stars. It's full of melodrama. It's full of pseudo culture. It's gorgeously shot, and of course it's cast with a dream cast of all stars. And Garbo's in it. She's not good at all. You can tell it looks like she's already tired of making faces and just wondering how long she's got to do this. And it's a pretty ridiculous role anyway. She's a ballerina who's a Russian ballerina who had to leave everything behind in Russia. And she's so weary. And she keeps saying, "I'm so weary." And it's just ludicrous. It's actually, it would be comic if she let it be, if she'd take it. But she's left alone with a bottle of sleepy pills. And she says, "Should I kill myself or not?" And she has to say it aloud because John Barrymore has to overhear it. So maybe it's just that it was an absolutely ridiculous movie. I love it because I keep saying, you know, there are ways to act that where if you went into it saying, when do I talk aloud to myself? And you remembered this sense memory of times when you do talk. You know, every morning when you see this little medallion?
Yes.
Every morning when I get up, if I had a parrot, the first thing it would learn to say would be, "Where is that necklace?" Because every morning of my life, I say, "Where is that necklace?"
Yes.
If you could, could you talk aloud about killing yourself using that memory to do it? Like, maybe I should just kill myself. You know, it would be very different from, "I think I shall kill myself," but maybe you'd believe it. Now, whether she would ever get a believable response from John Barrymore, who is an ideal movie actor, he knows, he's like Bill Holden. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what effect it has. He could do 20 takes of it and it would be exactly the same every take. You know, he's very good at what he does. And then tell me anytime I'm going on too long.
No.
And then also in the film are Joan Crawford and Lionel Barrymore. And she plays a little, everyone says it's her best performance ever. Well, it certainly is the flashiest. She knew she was in a picture with Garbo and they were going to come out remembering Joan Crawford instead of Garbo. And all she does is flash. It's an absolutely amazing. She's like some luminescent sea creature, you know, but she's great. And she's playing a little stenographer who picks up extra money by going away for the weekends with businessmen. And she's about to do that when the businessman gets in trouble. And then this nice old man, Lionel Barrymore, whom she's become friendly with at the bar in the hotel, she's not going to get the money for going away now with the other businessman. So she can't afford a drink for herself. And he buys her a drink. And he says, "You know, I'm going to die soon." And it's so sympathetic. He said, "That's why I'm here. My doctor told me I'm going to die. There's nothing to be done about it. I took all the money I'd saved and I brought it to spend this weekend in the Grand Hotel." why don't you let me give you money if you need money? She says, oh, I could. Yes, you could come away with me. I've never seen England. He was going to take you to England. Come away with me. She says, and what, would you buy me pretty clothes? And he says, yes. And it's all completely innocent, like a mother and father. Well, you know that the writer must have known that with the least little bit of emphasis, she could break our hearts by having Joan and Lionel fall into the same relationship, not a sweet, innocent mother-daddy relationship, but if Joan just said, and you'll want to buy me clothes. And he said, oh, yeah, yeah. You know, now that's a spot where it's completely the choice of the actors or director.
Yes.
And I think it could have been great. And I have a suspicion that on Broadway and the West End, it may have been acted that way, but we'll never know. We've got Joan.
Let me ask you something, Rob. Have you ever, you live in Hollywood, I mean, Los Angeles. Have you ever applied for the writers unit at the Actors Studio? They have an open, Lou Antonio runs it. You would be fabulous there.
Well, I never studied writing.
You don't know, but as a playwright and you have such knowledge, you should be at Actors Studio. They have a unit called, actually, I'm going to send this tape to Lyle Kessler, who wrote Orphans. He runs the playwright unit in New York, but Lou Antonio runs it out here. And they have to, people have to, I want you, you know, our time is just about up, but I want to, after the new year, I really want you back.
Oh, thank you.
No, I mean, I've had lots of guests on, but I'm going to say this, you have such knowledge and such a gift, and people must know about what you know. I mean, you come from where theater began.
Well, thank you.
You know, I mean, American theater began with off-Broadway, and you are part of it. And I never realized what a gift you are until listening to you.
Well, thank you very much.
No, really. I mean, I'm just sitting here amazed. I'm saying, my God, the world got to hear this man.
Well, thank you
what
very
a
much.
gift you are.
I had some other
Robert
pictures.
Patrick,
I had some other pictures I wanted to show you.
Okay.
If I can remember how to get to the pictures thing. I think it's down here.
That's your Santa Claus there.
Oops. I think it's right here. Oh, here's Shirley and Kennedy's Children.
Yeah, I see. Oh,
Can you see it?
there it is. Yes, I saw it. I saw it.
And here's one of the shows I sing in here, the Crazy Cabaret that I sing in here in LA. Oh, and here's one that you'll like. Just a minute. Oh, there it is. That's a play at the Cafe Chino.
Ah.
That's me on your left. That's Lanford Wilson as the king sitting in the throne. And standing next to him is the great director, Marshall Mason.
Wow.
We were all cast. That's how casual it was.
Yes.
We were the right kind of personalities. So we were cast, though we might not be actors. You know, here's one of, see, I have to play with it to get it to work. Here's one of the interior of the Chino. Oh, there it is. Can you get some feeling of the spirit of it?
Sure. Very
That's
good.
what it looked. That's where Lanford Wilson and Sam Shepard started.
Wow.
And let's see, I could do, if I came back on, I could prepare.
Yes, well, we're going to do right at the first of the year. I'm going to get back to you, and you can have all this ready, and we'll do it.
I'll do a whole picture show for you.
I would love that. That would be so great.
Well, thank you.
Bernadette
very
Peters.
much.
No, thank you. And I really, and your iPad 3 friend who's been listening, you have a friend that's on here.
Oh.
I don't know his name. It just says iPad 3. He's a friend of yours.
Hi, iPad 3.
He's from Florida, it says.
Oh, wait, I've got another one here.
Yeah.
This is a play where Marilyn Monroe tries to be an artist,
Oh, really?
and Andy Warhol comes on, and as you see, literally rips her image off.
Ah,
Can you see him there?
yes. Yes.
My friend Carol Nelson played Marilyn Monroe for me.
Ah.
Well, thank you. I guess you want to go.
Well, it's that I want people to see this, and I want to come. You're amazing, and I really appreciate. Thank you so much, Robert Patrick.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
no.
you.
Listen, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and
Yeah.
you definitely will be on many times. And this,
Happy holidays to you.
okay, God bless. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night.